Jackson gave me the news of a planet far away. And Colonel O'Neill will assemble a team that will try to save the day. Dr. Sam has a master plan and a science attitude. And the job for Teal, he's part of the deal with his trusty go-out. It's just a regular day at Stargate Command, and it might be hard to understand.
Chevron 1 encoded. Chevron 2 encoded. Chevron 3 encoded. Chevron 4 encoded. Oh no, this is gonna happen. Chevron 5 encoded. Chevron 6 encoded. Chevron 7 what? We have a stable world.
Welcome back to another episode of Three Fries Short. They all, unfortunately, can't be bangers. I'm your co-fry, Sarah.
That sounds how you really feel. I am your co-fry, Cristina.
And I'm your co-fry, Wells.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Season 4 had a great start, but we've hit a snag. But don't worry. We have
you
lots
were
to
an
say.
opinion of one.
I'm a hater. I'm
You
a
don't speak
hater.
for all of us.
I speak for me.
I feel like this is gonna be like this is Christina's moment. This episode. This is like.
But I don't love this one. There's things to talk about. Like the Tism in me has topics. I have topics. This one gives me topics. I don't know that it's a good episode though.
I don't hate the topics. I hate the delivery system.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Oh yes, in concurrent. We have different martyrs. We have different martyrs. We have different meters. Anyway, we will get into it. We were getting a little warmed up before we went live, just really talking this through. So I'm excited. I think
we can't just, as John would say now, raw dog it from the jump. We have to talk to each other and warm up first, you know?
we got to know where everyone stands.
Because it's not like we talk to each other all day, every day, at all times or anything.
Not in like 5 different groups.
But not face to face. Not face to face like this.
Correct.
This is different. So, yeah.
So before we get into this episode, is there anything that we have for the fry box?
I mean, we have the same fry box that we had last week, but it's worth repeating again the plans. So I can hop us in there real quick.
Yeah, we gotta hop. We gotta go.
Short, 'cause we're Three Fries Short.
Well, do you want to take us away on this?
Yeah. It's just that we're gonna be at shore leave in Lancaster, Pennsylvania from July 26th through the 28th. And we're really excited. We'll be there with Amanda and Terrell, and Lawrence is coming, and some companion members, and I don't know who else, but I think it's going to be a good time. I'm excited about it. We get to do another panel. This time we get 50 whole minutes instead of 30.
Woo-hoo!
So look at that. We're like moving up in the world. They're giving us more time to talk.
I don't know if that's a good or bad thing.
I mean, I personally had never heard of a 30-minute long panel at a con anyway. That was real short. So
yeah. That was a moment in time. That con was.
Yeah, and then there's the giant clock just counting down, like as like doomsday.
Oh, yeah. I don't think we ever told. Maybe we told people like it's literally just massive.
It was this giant thing, and I'm just staring at it like it's up to me to make sure we hit that. Like I'm driving this conversation with my microphone. That's I have a microphone right here, but yeah, it should be really fun.
This time?
It is. I have triple checked. So if it kicks out, if anybody was at the companion thing yesterday, I had audio issues like at the very beginning.
Oh no.
Great times, but it's fine. We worked through it. But yeah. So shore leave. It's gonna be great.
2 weeks away. Yeah.
I know. I think we can get one more
week and a half
before then.
Probably.
Yeah,
maybe.
Can we get beneath the surface in? It's scorched earth before beneath the surface. I'm trying to time Sam's haircut with my own at this point.
I love that for you.
I can't stand it. I'm so tired of it. Both Sam's and mine.
so many opinions.
See, aren't you?
Yeah.
This is the stuff we talk about, behind the scenes.
Yeah. So
Fact that my
this is
hair
why
is way
we
too
why
long.
we're late. I know.
Yeah, that's it. That's all I got. So, yeah.
Cool. Do you want to
Yeah.
talk about the companion event that you just had?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think it was a really good event, and I'll explain who was there and everything. But it, I think, was unexpectedly good. Like Lawrence and I got out of the live stream, and we were like, that like meshed really well. So Stephanie Chakowski, who played one of the bridge officers on Star Trek Picard, Lieutenant Savine, came and talked about mental health, and we talked to her about career points that she hit, but we were able, like, it wove into the mental health and like everything like that. And then she's a survivor, a long hauler of 3 unrelated kinds of cancer. So at one point she takes us through that whole timeline, which is wild. Like, you should go listen to it or watch it or listen to it there. So I'm not going to say the whole thing here. But listening to her talk about just how fast all of that happened, and a lot of, you don't want to say she was lucky, because she wasn't lucky to have to deal with 3 kinds of cancer, like, back to back to back. But everything healthcare wise and healthcare team wise fell into place, like, really well for her along that journey. So, yeah, I think it's worth a listen. She's pretty inspirational as far as, everything she's had to deal with. She's dealt with the loss of both of her parents too. We talked about that. There's a lot of really deep stuff that we got into with her. So if you don't know who she is, go watch Picard, or Doom Patrol. She was in Doom Patrol. And then, but before that, you should just like watch her talking about it, because it was just so good. I thanked her so many times afterwards. And then she dropped in Social Hour for a little bit. So that was really cute.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
got to
where
meet
is
her
that?
and Jen at in Philadelphia.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah.
So that is available on the Companion's YouTube to watch?
Yep. It's public right now. I will be doing like a cut, like a VOD version of it, but you can watch the whole interview right now still from the same link. Or if you go to lives, on the Companion's YouTube, you can find it there. It shouldn't be hard.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to watch that one. I think I've missed the past few, so I've got a few to catch up on. But that one,
yeah, we're getting into some, we can't all, if you want to talk about, it can't always be bangers. You can't always have like the super known person from your favorite Stargate show as a guest all the time. But you've got a lot of these people who are like legitimately like working actors in the industry, who you probably have seen in 5 different things and you don't even realize it. And they have really incredible stories. She even talked about just like going through the audition process and what that may or may not do as far as your identity and how you feel about yourself, like when you don't get something, things like that. So it's the conversation was really kind of, it was cool the way it flowed, like all the way. Lars and I were like, we want people to know about her career, so we want to hit the career talk. Like, we don't necessarily have to do with Amanda all the time anymore, because all of our people are pretty familiar with Amanda. So we wanted to give a proper intro to her and everything she's done. But it worked out really well. So check her out. Check the non-binary panel out if you haven't seen that one. I was really proud of that one. It was pre-recorded and then we edited, so I got to do a lot of editing work, ahead of time before people saw it.
Nice.
And I think the next one is, we'll be a shore leave, so we won't have one. And it's supposed to be Michelle Hurd after that. But I have to reconfirm. So that's the next one coming up.
That's exciting.
Yeah. Staying busy.
I love this kind of integration of fandoms too, right? Because there's like Trek coming into play. There's a lot of actors that cross a bunch of different series, but I really think it's cool to see it kind of like spider webbing out, or like whatever, you tree branching out into like really the collective fandom and not just silos. And I think that's really something that I've always loved about the Companion, and why we initially like got like following them and all the stuff was like, for me personally, was the integration of fandoms versus this like I said, like where you feel like you have to go here, then you have to pivot there.
Sure.
And this Embracing Mental Health series, for anyone who hasn't listened to it so far, has just been like, I don't really get what it's in it for me. honestly feels also just like community building.
Mhm.
It's little, you see a little bit of yourself in all these different spaces, and it is not gate kept in any sort of way, which I know can happen a lot in nerddom and fandom. But in this particular case, it's really grassroots, like going across the whole space. So it feels really
Yeah.
cool.
It is, and it's more watchable than ever. Our live streams are wide open for people to watch now because we have other member things going on, and we have, if there are members out there listening, we have even other member like plans and ideas. So just like it's exciting, but yeah, it's a good time to like go back and reintroduce yourself to the companion or introduce yourself to the companion and watch what we have going on. I've like the whole reason I was happy to start working there was just that they have conversations that are not the same conversations that I hear at conventions over and over again, and they're not the same questions. And that's what keeps it interesting to me, like it just in some ways it's just as evergreen as like, oh, what about that season 2 episode 3 like moment or whatever. But I think it's more poignant, and it's like who better to talk about mental health and listen and get inspired and hopefully get motivated by than like your favorite person on television. It's just like it's a win-win.
It is.
Yeah, it's a win-win. Yeah. Anyway, that's my companion announcement for for the week, but
I love it.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Cool. So let's get into this episode. We are talking about season 4, episode 8. It's called The First Ones. Overall thoughts on this episode?
I thought it was a very solid Daniel episode. I'll get my Daniel commentary out of the way, and then I'll leave Cristina to the rest of it. But I think it showed his character pretty well. It showed like a lot of his ideals, which we haven't seen very terribly recently, I feel like, in a lot of ways. So that was good. I think the part that falls flat for me is the rescue effort and like how that was scripted and kind of how it unfolded. I think the Daniel and the Unas part is pretty solid. But I feel like there could have been more. That's my thing, I think. Maybe that's the vessel you're talking about, Sarah. I don't know.
No.
But I just didn't. The rescue effort fell really flat for me. Like the whole second, the B story fell kind of flat for me.
I would agree. I appreciate this episode because it does kind of let Daniel stand on his own, where we see full 360, like in this situation, his skills come into play, and not just like a fixer of something, but truly like with his flaws, still see his humanity, like get himself through a situation, and like he stood on it, like die or not, like he stood on how he was gonna act in that scenario, and that was really important to him. So I really appreciated that. We also got to see a little bit of his bratty behavior, just kind of sarcasm come through, and I like thought that was quite entertaining because he's gotten more confident in that voice. And I do agree that the rescue efforts felt scrambled and strange with a weird Gould subplot, and we'll get to that. It could have been more. And my final thought is I have points to talk about how primitive culture or primitive kind of representation happened in this episode. And that's a more discussion point for later on. But ultimately, the Daniel piece of it was a really good episode for character building for him, or character showing. It didn't really build it, just kind of showed him.
Yeah. I do agree that if it was anyone other than Daniel, I don't think it would have played out the same way. Daniel has been overdue for like his own episode. Like it's been a hot minute since he's had a Daniel centric episode. I actually,
especially one that doesn't involve a woman or like
right,
very true.
Kind of weird romance thing. Like, yeah.
Good point.
Like let him be him, like the true like cultural archaeologist. Let him be that person.
Yeah. I don't want to say I enjoyed the B plot more. I found it more entertaining and interesting. And we'll get into that, but I found probably about 75% of Daniel and the Unis' time together extremely frustrating because they use that trope of we don't speak the same language, and 75%, half of it, it's like them trying to communicate. And it's like that you don't know what he's saying. You don't know if Daniel is guessing correctly of what they're saying. It's just, it bored me. Like, but then there were some parts in there that were pretty funny and cool, and you could tell that like, oh, they're actually bonding. Okay. But other than that, I'm like, this is boring to me. Like, I hate this trope. I'm not a
It's
fan.
so funny because I'm completely opposite from you on this episode.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
Well, and, like
found the subplot of the planet far more interesting of like, wow, the Gould evolved on this planet. There's these Gould that are like living in the waters and Sam and Teal can't sense them. What's their deal? And
Mhm.
like what are these Gould that took over some people? Like they didn't even, I don't know, like that was way more interesting. And maybe like if we got more backstory on the Unis, which maybe we will find out, I might forget, but it's like, what is this ritual? Is this ritual like we need to bring back a sacrifice because they're a Gould and we need to like protect ourselves and like we have to go out and hunt one of these Gould as a coming of age thing so that we can protect ourselves from them? I don't know. Like I feel like a lot of that was lost because it was like, what does non mean? Like that kind of shit. I'm like, that could have been so much more.
I love this. I think this discourse will be really good for us at the end because I completely see where you come from, Sarah, and like how you like approach the episode. And I think I'm somewhere in the middle between you and Wells on. I feel very opposite. I love this like need to understand, and it's a trope that I find interesting because it goes so many different ways. But it honestly reminded me more so of like experiences with raising a child and trying to like understand and trying to speak to them, and you're like, you don't understand me, but I'm still going to talk to you because like maybe you'll understand the impact behind it. And I thought that was some interesting spaces with Daniel and his frustration about where I initially would probably watch it and be like, why did he say all of it? He knows that the Unas can't hear him, but now as a mom to a child who's like trying to explain something, sometimes like sometimes you just have to get the thought out of your head regardless if you think the person's going to hear you or not. So
Yeah. And
yeah, that'd be good
I do
to
think
get
there's
into.
some place for that trope. Like, I don't want it to be lazy where it's like, this hearing aid will help me understand all languages and we won't have to struggle. Like, there has to be some kind of struggle or friction. But if it's too much, I'm like, I hate this. Like, I can't describe it any other way. But that trope kind of frustrates me when they drag it out and make it like the whole most of his subplot with the Eunice is like trying to talk and learn the language, and I don't know. I wasn't a fan. I'm still stewing on that. But anyway,
Yes, we'll do it at the end.
we'll get into the episode. It opens on planet P3X888. SGC members are conducting an extensive archaeological dig, and you can tell they've been there for a while. They have certain little plots cordoned off that they've already dug up. There's tents, like they've hunkered down here. Daniel and Rothman, see Crystal Skull for Rothman reference, we saw him before. They are excavating a skeleton of what appears to be a Queen Gould symbiote. There's some back and forth about Rothman naming the fossil Cleopatra, and Daniel notes this particular queen appeared to be a predator and not a parasite. This confirms his theory that the Gould evolved for millions of years on this planet in their oceans and prehistoric times before ever taking on hosts. They test the fossil for naquita and find none, which is interesting because all of the others that they've encountered have some traces of naquita. And the ones that they've dug up on this planet that Rothman has named Brutus and Julius also showed no naquita. So this indicates it only became part of their makeup later in their evolution. Daniel flags down another SGC member on the site and says, just box it up. We're taking it to go. HOTTOGO. Let's go. And
go.
One of the other soldiers identified as Loader. He hears a twig snap, but looks and sees nothing. Then we see from this creature's point of view that is kind of stalking them from the tree line. And it moves closer. It runs up on Loader. He fires a gun at it. The rest of the personnel are like, oh my god, what's happening? And the creature like bats Loader away like he's a mosquito and knocks Daniel to the ground. and we see him get dragged away as Rothman and the others chase after. And then we have our opening credits. So they were stalked by this Predator-esque. It is kind of there's another Predator reference in here. I don't know if any of you guys kind of saw it, but it's kind of like a Predator-esque because it's like the distorted vision. It's so green and whatever. So back at the SGC, we have an unscheduled off-world activation. Walter identifies that it's SG-11, but they aren't due back for 2 more days. They open the iris, and a very exhausted Rothman comes through, and he's just sucking on that inhaler. He's dying. He ran. And I don't know how far away the site is from the Stargate. You kind of get the vibe that it's pretty far away. You don't see the Stargate in the background, and for the rescue subplot, it takes them a while to get there.
Yeah.
He tells Hammond that the rest of SG-1 that Loader is dead, some kind of indigenous life form who also took Daniel, and the rest of the team went after it. Rothman believes it was an Unis. So, amnesia check. What is an Unis? We have seen an Unis 2 times before. Season 3, Episode 8, Demons, and Season 1, Episode 10, Thor's Hammer. These life forms were the original hosts to the Goa'uld before they started taking human hosts. Until this point, we have never met one who was not a host before. So in both Demons and Thor's Hammer, they were a host to a Goa'uld. We have never met one Sand symbiote. So Teal'c, wow, I was very formal. Teal'c and Samantha, I don't know if I copied that from the transcript. Teal'c and Sam point out this Unis might not be a Goa'uld. Daniel believes this planet could be where all the Goa'uld symbiotes originated from, and there could be indigenous Unis who still live there. O'Neill points out, well, we're still talking about a big stinky monster. Makes no difference. Yikes. Teal'c counters with, actually it does, because they're not going to be as impervious. Like, the 2 Unis that we've met before were very hard to kill. They were super strong, super fast, like, didn't really need a lot of rest. They could go for hours and, like, chase people down. But without the symbiote, it's going to be easier to kill. Hammond gives SG-1 and SG-2 permission to set out on a rescue mission. Cut back to the planet. Daniel is on the ground, unconscious. He begins to wake up. He opens his eyes. The Unis growls nearby. Daniel looks and sees that his hands are tightly bound in front of him. The rope leads from his hands to the Unis, so it's like he's on a leash. The Unis paces impatiently. He's wearing some crude clothing, and there's a wound on his hand from being shot. Daniel raises his head off the ground and looks around for some type of escape, but the Unis, like, he kind of senses it, and he starts tugging Daniel along.
This is like a really weird point for me that really bothered me. Like, I kept fixating on how did he tie the ropes with the way that their hands are, and it was like something that I just got really confused about, because
how did he do fine beadwork on that the bone necklace that he's wearing?
Yeah, these are like the weird plot holes that I was like, something is missing here.
No.
Anyway, we can continue.
It's because of the limitations of a human hand inside a prosthetic glove hand that is supposed to be a different creature. That's why. That's why they're always so huge and like not for fine work thing.
That's true. Yeah. So, cut back to the SGC. Jack is ready to head out, gives the crew a brief rundown. He was like, we didn't get a chance to brief you, but here's the scoop. Let's go. Like, they didn't have a formal briefing or anything. It's literally like, get your shoes on and let's go. Rothman shows up.
I love this.
And do you guys want to read that? It's pretty funny.
Yeah. I can be Rothman. Yes, I have one. Oh wait, so Jack asks if there's questions, right? Or something like that, or something. Okay, so Rothman says, "Oh yeah, I have one. When exactly were you going to tell me we were leaving?" And he kind of said it in this like assholey, like commanding tone. Like, when were you going to tell me we were leaving?
I wasn't.
Oh,
move out.
Like, so he doesn't tell Rothman he's not allowed to come, but he wasn't going to invite him to come.
But this is something that missed like before this. So there was dialogue when they were on the planet before where Rothman was telling Daniel or someone that he really likes ordering the military type around.
Yes.
And he's been in this position because it was his mission. He could order people around. And like, I love that Jack was like, not me. I am not the one. Don't. and to like put him back in his place a little bit.
But he would be a good, he knows the lay of the planet. He knows the lay of the land. So like it would be smart to invite him, although they all fucking hate him for some reason. Like, oh, he's a nerdier scientist than Daniel, so we got to gang up on him.
Well, I kind of
hate
keep in mind that Jack does say he hates scientists, like from the get-go, from the beginning of the show. I guess he just has an exception of 2 exceptions in Daniel and Sam at this point, but like otherwise hates scientists.
He's a hater. I'll give him that.
Probably why you like him.
I appreciate the sentiment, but like, come on. So, cut to the planet. SG-1 and 2 are safely on the other side. The gate is secured. Jack tries to contact SG-11 by radio, but there's no response. They also have the UAV piloting around in a search pattern. No one, Daniel or SG-11, have responded or tried to contact them by radio, but they could be either incapacitated or just simply too far away. Teal'c points out that the Unis are basically marathon runners and can cover a lot of ground very quickly. Teal'c takes point, and the rest of SG-1 plus Rothman follow. There's also like 2. One's name is Griff, and I was like, is this Back to the Future Part 2? Griff? Is he a 50s greaser? That's his name?
Yeah.
Griff and some other guy. And then 2 people from SG-2 stay behind with the gate to like keep an eye on it. Make sure it doesn't go anywhere. So, cut to Daniel and the Unis. Daniel is exhausted. He's trying to talk to the Unis, but they don't understand each other. He falls over. He's like, I'm just going to take a nap. Like, I need to rest. I'm going to stop. And he also tries to use his radio, but the Unis immediately is like, no, bitch. And he swipes it out of his hand and like smashes it against a tree. Daniel says, I mean, you must be intelligent. You made that necklace and those clothes, which the necklace is key. Like, that is a little interesting tidbit we'll kind of come back to. So he gestures to the clothing and the necklace, and the creature like drags him to his feet and starts walking again. And he's like, "Oh yes, that was refreshing. Like,
this is where I'm
10 more miles."
I do love a sassy bratty Daniel in this episode. Like, I do appreciate that.
He's handling it quite well. So back with the rest of SG-1.
This is the second episode in a row where Daniel is pulling that Jack like feeling of, I'm probably like, we're 90% sure I'm gonna die.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna be snarky about it. Because he did it in Watergate, and now he's doing it here too. Of the like, I'm pretty sure they're gonna eat me. Lol. Like, what? Like, if it were text messaging times and he could text them, that's what he would have said. I'm pretty sure they're gonna eat me. LOL. That's the feeling that Daniel gives off in these, like, both of these episodes.
Again, like, I love it, and I would like to think I too would be that way, but I know I wouldn't. I'd be like, what the fuck? Get me out of here. Oh my god, I'm gonna die. He's gonna eat me. Yeah, I don't know. But maybe when you just become desensitized to being in these situations, it's like, well, it's another day at work. Let me clock in, punch the clock.
Get eaten by somebody, just a normal day.
Get eaten, get imploded. I don't know, whatever. What's on the docket today? Let me roll my dice and see what comes up. So back with the rest of SG-1, Sam picks up a strong RDF signal, which indicates Daniel might have tried to use his radio. Back with Daniel, the Unis is still dragging him along until they stop by a river. The Unis crouches down and seems to perform some kind of chant or ritual. Daniel hears this, looks up at him, and he sits up. So there's some kind of dialogue. It's like Daniel talking to himself. He's recording on his tape recorder as like a log of like, if you find me, this is what happened. So does someone want to read that? You guys want to take turns? Someone do like the narrator part, some kind of like direction.
I'll narrate.
Cool.
All right. This is where Daniel's saying, is this some sort of meditation? Okay. Is this some sort of meditation or?
The Unas ignores him and continues chanting. Daniel reaches into his left jacket pocket and brings out the recorder he was using at the dig site. He activates it and begins recording cautiously so as not to alarm or disturb the Unas.
This is Dr. Daniel Jackson. In case anybody finds this, I've met a wonderful new friend, and he's taking me on a long journey to see his friends.
The Unas hears him and suddenly stops chanting and looks at Daniel,
I'm just making notes.
and then into the recorder again.
At the moment, my main concern is that my new friend is an aboriginal Unas in its ungoulded state, and that I'm the evening meal.
Daniel looks at the chanting Unas.
Or rather, he appears to have undeveloped chin and facial horns, which indicate he could be a subspecies, possibly a juvenile.
The Unas growls at Daniel, who stops talking.
Shut up.
Like, you just call me a little boy, bitch? I'll slap you across this forest. I do think it's interesting that, and I don't know, but like, it's interesting that the Unis was seeming to be able to tell the difference between a radio of Daniel trying to call for help and this recording device that he's using. Like, he doesn't seem to care that he's recording or talking into this device.
They obviously didn't explain this, but
Right.
I was thinking about that too as I was watching it, and it could be because, they can tell that the radio has been activated. Like, Sam picks that up, so maybe, like, the Unas is really attuned and didn't like that, like, whatever, like
Frequency.
Like a frequency was
it was given off or something, and then the recorder's not doing that. That was my, like, personal, like, "Oh, I could excuse it this way."
Like some kind of, like, literal dog whistle that, like, he can only hear. Yeah.
Yeah, the frequency of the radio, yep.
Yeah. So there's some more dialogue, I guess. It's like Daniel trying to talk to him. This is the stuff that I cannot stand. Like, they're trying, I forget what words, but like they're trying to communicate. And then we see the UAV fly overhead. The Unis becomes distressed, and Daniel figures out that he's scared. Like, he's freaked out by this thing flying around that he's never seen before. And Daniel is able to calm him down. He's like, it's okay. It's okay. It's just my friends are looking for me. It's fine. It's okay.
Well, this is where, sorry to cut it, but this is where we see Daniel start his skill and his like education really start to come in for as like behavioral understanding, because he's looking at all the different ways of trying to communicate and being really responsive to it while also documenting. Like, he's trying to do the things that would give information while also trying to not agitate the situation, but also advocate for himself. But by just paying attention to body language and not like being egocentric in that space, but he's really trying to observe this Unas to figure it out. Starts to show like how important he is, because he is able to observe and then use that to help himself, because the Unas was not trying to observe Daniel and communicate with Daniel. So this was 100% Daniel's doing by the end.
So yeah, I agree. Again, like, back to what, like, my sentiment at the beginning, if this was anybody else on SG-1, it would not have played out the same way at all. Like, it had to be Daniel. So then cut back to the rest of SG-1. They point out the UAV has run out of batteries. There's some kind of weird cuts where it's like, oh, well, the UAV must be dead now. Bye. And then they cut back.
So they should have used those nuclear batteries from the Russians. That's all I'm saying. Missed opportunity.
Yeah.
A little bit.
So back with the Unis and Daniel, they approach a river, and Daniel tells the Unis that he needs water. The Unis allows it, and Daniel leans forward to drink, kind of like a dog, like just put his face to the water. And I rewatched this episode because I just need to watch it twice, and I realized kind of what was happening. Because at first, the Unis like takes him back and like shows him how to drink with his hand. And at first I read this like, look at this idiot. He's uncivilized. He doesn't even know how to drink. No, he shows Daniel drink and then look around, because we find out that there's something in the water. So he's trying to show Daniel a safer way to drink. Like, don't do it this way. You do it this way. You have to stay alert. So the Unis does release Daniel, not fully from, he doesn't untie his hands, but he lets like the leash go. And he's staying alert. He's looking around, not really paying attention to Daniel, and he takes that as an opportunity to run away. So the Unis does catch up to Daniel, and he begins swimming across this river. But we see the Unis is not willing to go in the water at all. And Daniel pauses, and then we see something swimming toward him. Daniel backs out of the water towards the Unis, and this creature leaps out of the water. It is a Gould symbiote, fully matured, this is not the part where I laughed. There was a part where I laughed.
There's
But-
some downright slapstickiness to the.
But like when it
this
flew,
episode.
when it flew out of the water, it had its like little like flappy wings going, and I didn't know they could
when
do
it
that.
flew at Teal'c,
It's
I
like-
like
It was
yeah, it was pretty funny.
sorry. Continue.
So it like launches itself out of the water, and the Unis just grabs it out of the air and like pulls it in half, breaks it apart, and he smears the blood on Daniel's face, kind of like
It's just
alien.
like blue paint.
Yeah, yeah.
It was paint.
So this again was a part that was interesting to me. There's fully formed, fully alive Goulds living in these waters.
Mm-hmm.
So then we see SG-1 plus Rothman and the two other people on SG-2. They arrive at the dig site. The rest of the crew, they find Loder's body. Teal'c can also confirm it was an Unis based on the tracks, and he will be able to follow it and track it throughout the woods. One of the other soldiers from SG-2 emerges from the bushes with one of the men from the dig site. His name is Hawkins. So there is some dialogue. Hawkins, Carter, O'Neill. Yeah.
That's it.
Cool. So I'll do the O'Neill.
All right, I'll take Hawkins.
Go for it.
Okay. We were attacked. Sanchez is dead for sure. I don't know what happened after that. We got split up. I was hoping some of them might have made it back.
Major, we've been trying to contact you for the last few hours.
And then Hawkins just stares around. And anyway, O'Neill says, "My men are dead, aren't they?"
Look, Hawkins, I can't spare anyone to take you back to the Stargate. You're going to have to stick with us. Can you do that?
Whatever you say, sir.
Let's move out. So they picked up a stray, and this guy is acting really weird. He's kind of like catatonic, not really acting like you would when a commanding officer. Is he a colonel? I don't know what he is. But like, I don't know. He was acting kind of weird from the jump. You could tell. So then we see Daniel and the Unis. They enter a cave. SG-1 and the crew make it to a riverbed and decide to take some time to rest. In the cave, we see that Unis is cooking the dead symbiote over a fire. He tries to share it with Daniel, who respectfully declines. They share a moment. This was actually like pretty cool. Yeah. I did like this moment where the Unis continues to try and share it with Daniel and like show him it's food, I'm eating it. And Daniel's like, no. And they're tossing it back and forth. And the Unis does kind of laugh and chuckle at it. And then Daniel just tosses it on the fire. He's like, oh no, don't worry.
Whoops.
Yeah. But he's like, don't worry. And he pulls out like a candy bar from his pocket or like a protein bar. And he shares it with the Unis. And what did he say? He's like, don't caw until you've tried it. And it's like,
Right.
you just did
But you
that.
cawed until you tried it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you didn't try it.
But to be fair, like Daniel's seen a ghoul before. Like it's a little bit different. Like you're like, I know what this thing alive has done. I'm not gonna try a dead one.
Yeah.
Like
One in
where-
Rome.
But like a block of gooey, poopy looking stuff that you've never seen before.
Probably a lot
I
of
mean,
peanut butter in there. Yeah.
lots peanut
Yeah.
butter.
Shit.
It honestly kind of did look like a brick of poo. So like,
It did.
I don't know.
Yeah. No.
So
But-
yeah, that was actually like a pretty funny moment between them, and you can tell like they do share this bonding moment. And Daniel made a really cool reference to the movie where he's like, "This is funny, like this is kind of how I met my father-in-law with the what is it, like a Baby Ruth bar or something, or a Snickers bar." So back at SG-1's camp, O'Neill asked Rothman if Hawkins is acting weird. Rothman is clueless. He's not a people person. And this is where I'm like, okay, maybe I need to chill. Because I'm like, dude, anyone with eyes can tell he's acting weird. Like, you spent more time with him than anyone. But if he's truly, like, not a people person and not good at reading people's faces or expressions and stuff, like, I get it. Like, I think I was just being, like, I don't know. But he's like, if it was a fossil, like, I could tell you what it ate for breakfast that day. But people, not so much. But O'Neill picked up on it right away. Like, something's not right with this guy. This is you'll appreciate this, Wells. This is where we get some like really nice
By
shots of Sam.
appreciate, you mean don't appreciate.
Okay, but she looked beautiful. Is like her hair was blown in the and not even like I loved her hair in this shot. I was just like, this is like, what is this? Like, why is this necessary?
No, that's exactly why I don't like it, because it was like, oh, the one like woman in this episode gets like 4 lines. We should probably put some extra shots of her in there or something. And like, it's just really weird. And they're like glamour shots. They're like,
okay, but she looks so
Peter DeLuise, I'm coming for you, because he wrote it and directed it. But yeah, that's. I mean, of course she's beautiful. Of course she's beautiful. That's not the point.
So the camera pans to Hawkins, who we thought was asleep, but his eyes open and they glow. He's a Gould. Dun dun dun.
Shocker.
So back in the cave, Daniel is using his recorder to take notes. So there's a bunch of him talking through this. Do you guys want to read that?
Yeah, and pre-apologies, Tux has decided to come and be a snoring menace in my arms. So if you hear kitty purrs, it's Tux.
That's, Tux is being the Unas, in the scene. Like the
He's literally buried like in my arm right now, so I can't move. Oh, there you are. Okay. There, get cozy. All right. Okay, so Daniel says, I'm in a cave. There are crude drawings, pictographs. The Unas seems to have a comprehension of Gould symbiote species structure, as well as their ability to blend.
He walks deeper into the caves, observing the drawings on the walls.
Obviously, the Unas who were taken over must have figured out how to work the Stargate and left, but why not all of them?
Daniel turns and looks at his captor.
This Unas wears a strange bony neck piece. At first, I thought it was purely ornamental, but now I suspect it must serve as some small safeguard to protect against symbiotes penetrating the neck. Some of the Aboriginal Unas must have realized that their kind were being taken over and taken refuge in these caves.
Daniel looks at the drawings on the walls depicting Unas hunting captives. He edges further into the caves.
This is a rite of passage. There are parallels in Earth culture. For example, the Maasai, is that how you pronounce it? Maasai warriors? Sorry if I'm not saying that right. Of Africa kill lions in order to be recognized as adult warriors.
A growl is heard from behind, and Daniel spins around to see the Unas standing immediately behind him.
I think I understand what it is you are doing.
So the Unas uses his nail to cut Daniel's cheek, and he just smears some of his blood on the cave wall. And Daniel makes notice he thinks he's just been marked for death. So again, like, this is something they could have built upon and expand. Like, why is this a ritual? Did they decide to do this as a way to safeguard themselves and like hunt down like colonizers on their land, or like the Gould who have taken human host and come back? Like, why is this a ritual, a rite of passage? So the next morning at the campsite, Teal'c is looking over the water. This is where I cackled. He turns around and a symbiote
flappy on this one.
Yeah, it launches out of the water. It was hilarious. And Teal'c shoots it with the staff weapon.
Is this the one that flapped? It wasn't the Daniel one. It was this one. Oh, okay.
This is the one that's like real flappy.
Okay. Like it's flying.
Okay. This is the one I meant to laugh at, not Daniel's. And I take back that laugh. I reserve it for this one.
So we have some dialogue. Teal'c, Carter, O'Neill, and Rothman.
There's a lot of Teal'c.
Okay. I can do Teal'c.
I'll do Carter.
Then I'll
do Carter
Rothman.
Oh, okay, yeah. Can I help you, sir? Sorry, one moment. I have a very needy fat cat.
He's like, oh.
Well, I had to get him over the cord, otherwise he's gonna knock everything over. I know that was very graceful. You were like a
his eyes were like, oh god.
You were doing a reenactment, buddy, of the Gould just flying across.
Flapping.
Okay, complete now please go. Or stay there. Okay. I'm Teal'c. Okay. Teal'c. One or more of you may have become host to a Gould during your watch.
Teal'c, that doesn't make any sense. I don't sense.
You yourself may have been compromised.
What makes you think there are Gould around here?
These waters abound with them.
There's still like a bubbly, like a water bubble source.
Yeah, it's like the rest
behind
of them
him
are
the whole
eating the
time.
one that Teal'c just shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyone who has ventured near the edge has put themselves at risk.
No, the Gould fossils we find are millions of years old. This planet, we have been on this planet for weeks.
Then perhaps you maintain the pretense of being human.
I think I would know if there was a snake in my head. And then Jack says, Carter?
I can't explain it, sir. I can't even sense the ones that are in the water.
Again, this is something that would have been interesting if they expand upon it. Why are these Gould different? I don't know. They never tell us. So any of them could be a Gould. Sam agrees that this is the smartest thing to do. Like, we got to listen to Teal'c. He's right. Teal'c is the only one who would not be able to be possessed by a symbiote. So Teal'c tells them he will tie them up, and then he'll go find Daniel without them, and he'll call them an Uber over the radio to have the other team come back and pick them up. Back in the cave, the Unis is sleeping, and Daniel picks up a large rock intending to smash his head in with it. But at the last minute, he decides against it. The Unis wakes up at the sound of Daniel throwing the rock on the ground, and Daniel notices the injured hand, and he offers to help him with it. Back at the river, Teal'c finishes tying everybody up, and this was really funny. Like, O'Neill is talking to Teal'c. He's like, I'm telling you, it's Hawkins. And Teal'c is just like, trust me. And you know he's cooking up something good.
Mm-hmm.
And Jack's like, what if I'm not me? And Teal'c said, then I wasn't talking to you. So I thought that was pretty funny. Jack and Sam trust Teal'c, but the others are pissed and they're grumbling and moaning and groaning. And he tries to reason. Oh, wait, just kidding. Back in the cave, Daniel pulls the bullet from the Unis's hand, and you could tell that Unis is like, oh my God, this is amazing. Thank you, man. And he tries to
I will say the facial acting in this Unis is like the actor did. I mean, that's some expressive eyes. Like, he did a good job being like, shock, awe. And like, I just caught myself mid watching this being like,
hard to do under all that.
I was just gonna say, yeah.
Like, that's impressive, to be honest.
All
the
that
conveying of
SFX.
emotions. Yeah. So kudos to him.
I kind of thought that the Unis looked like the creeper from Jeepers Creepers. Maybe the mouth part. I don't know.
Oh yeah, maybe.
So he tries to reason with the Unis, but it doesn't work. And we see Daniel kind of scribbling on the cave walls before the Unis drags him away. Back at the riverbank, the crew are just chilling, and the others are, again, they're moaning and groaning, and they're like, this is bullshit. What if the Unis comes back? And they're talking about who it could be, and that's when Hawkins like snaps the zip ties off his hands and his eyes glow.
Literally say, if you're a Goa'uld, like, raise your hand, and he's like,
it's me.
like
dumb shit.
Cool.
Yeah.
But that kind of makes me feel like in some way the Goa'uld are a little bit primitive in that space of that very like, you say this, I do that. It's very infantile. Like, there's not a lot of conscious context around like knowing you shouldn't do that.
Well, at least this subset of Goa'uld.
Correct.
Like,
they also likely don't have like full control over people either. You know, like the younger ones oftentimes don't have full control over them as well.
Or do they? I don't know. That's again, like, I have questions that I'll pose at the end. But we don't really learn too much about this kind of subset of Goa'uld. Do they have any genetic memory at all of anything that's happened since? I don't know. Do they know that like they're out dominating the galaxy and taking over shit? We don't know. So Jack starts calling for Teal'c as Hawkins picks up a gun and approaches Jack. And Teal'c emerges from the tree line and shoots Hawkins right away, you know, right before Hawkins has a chance to get Jack. So there's some dialogue here. Teal'c was super smart. This was his whole plan the whole time. So we have O'Neill, Teal'c, and Carter. And some Griff. I'll get the Griff.
I'll take Teal'c.
So O'Neill says, well, that took you long enough.
You're welcome, O'Neill. I knew if there was a Goa'uld among you, he would be strong enough to free himself.
You had to wait long enough to make sure Hawkins wasn't the only one.
Yes.
Are you satisfied now?
I am.
So that's a very sensual yes, by the way. He's like, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. That's all I'll say for now about this entire scene. I'm like,
Yes.
I hate it. I hate this scene.
Wait, why?
Because there
part?
is no, like, any sort of problem solving that SG-1 have all proven that they're good at that would involve, like, less killing of just random soldiers or whatever, or, like, putting people in danger, like, all out the window. All out the window, and it's just slapstick feeling. Like, "Oh, let me raise my hand and crack the thing," and what's about to come up too. I hated it. I hated this scene. The way that they like, not because Teal'c's figuring it out, but that it's just so, like it just feels like they
boom,
never
boom, and
figure
done.
things out this way. Like, it's not any sort of, like, safe or scientific or anything that they usually do in these situations. It's, like, completely haphazard, and it puts, like, everybody at risk. So it just feels really out of place, and it feels weird, and then, like, to add the, like, slapsticky go old, both of those moments, that the one that's about to come up in this
Yeah.
too, I just all of it on top of it, this is why, like, I'm like, I hate this. I just hate it so much.
I feel like ever since the beginning of the series, when Kowalski was taken by a Gould, once they figured out, like, it's extremely difficult to extract a Gould, they just don't give a shit, especially if it's not a main character, by the way. They're just like,
Mhm.
"Well, I guess we just
It's a
gotta
red shirt
kill him."
situation.
Yeah.
It's a red shirt
Yeah,
situation.
like, they don't try, they don't care, it's like, "Oh, well, too bad," like
But
but
it's
then,
almost
like
like Teal'c going away, be like, "Trust me, O'Neill, let me go hide in the woods." Like,
Scooby-Doo
it's
music in
just
the
all
background.
like, it's really, like, hokey. Like, I think that's the word I'm looking for. It just the
Yeah.
whole scene feels really, really hokey, and I'm like, What is this? Like, what is happening? Where are our, like, good brains, Like, what is going on? It's less that, oh, they have to kill the people, but it's more like
Okay.
that, like, how that whole thing plays out is just like, really? Like Teal'c's behind a tree, just like, "I'm gonna get him." Like, what?
It feels like they're like, "Aha!" Like, it's like that type of scripting, just very
Yeah.
comic.
Yeah.
Like an owl if you're in danger.
Like, make the sound of a dying giraffe, like, what?
Yeah.
I think that's why I don't like the B plot, because this is like this is the big, like, the summation of the B plot, where we don't get any explanation of a lot of it, and then it's, like, hokey on top of that, and I'm like, it's just like, what is this? Why did we even go here? It's
And then a trap door opens up.
that's what it feels like. Anyway, so I got my whole, like, end of episode argument out of this, but yeah, that's why this scene right here is the culmination of why I don't like this B plot.
Okay.
Very valid. Very
I
valid.
understand. So
Very valid.
as
No,
Teal'c
just
goes,
imagining Teal'c hiding behind, like, a log in the forest.
in those old cartoons where, like, if something was gonna move, it was animated differently,
Yeah.
and you're like, "That rock, something's going on." It's like
Because it's, like, off of the background. Yeah.
yeah, like the
Mhm.
acetate. Yes, yeah. Oh, God.
Okay.
And then it's like the music that plays when, like, every sound they step is like squish, squish, squish. Oh, if there's any animator people out there, please, like, animate. I would love to see it. So anyway, after this Scooby-Doo nonsense happens, Teal'c goes to cut Rothman's ties, and he sees that Rothman's wrists are kind of cut up, indicating he had been struggling to break his zip ties off too. His eyes glow. He attacks Teal'c and shoots Griff in the arm. Jack shoots Rothman. R.I.P. His symbiote was a good actor? Question mark. This is where I wish we had more information.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get back to this.
Yes.
Griff and the other guys stay behind while SG-1 continue on to look for Daniel. They do kind of, like, give a shit. They're like, they deserve a good burial. What does that mean? Does that mean, are you gonna bury them on this shit ass planet, or are you gonna take them
Why are
home?
you not
Like,
gonna
we've
take them
never-
back to
Wait.
like, their families?
Like,
yeah,
we've
right,
never
what does
had that
that mean?
conversation before. Like, it's always just been like, yeah, that,
I mean, they usually take them back,
Yeah.
yeah.
Don't bury
Anyway.
them there. Good God. Give
Multiple
their families
reasons not
some
to bury them
closure.
there. One, their families. Two, probably, like, leaving random humans from Earth on planets is probably not a good idea either, if you can help it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows what could happen?
Oh
So
God.
they find a cave and the blood smear. I thought this was pretty funny.
Great.
This is kind of some Scooby-Doo shit too, honestly.
It is.
So
But it's like you're just seeing, you're like, oh, that's what Snarky Daniel wrote. Like,
yeah.
because you saw him writing it earlier, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
what he put there? What is
Yeah.
it?
So Teal'c is like, this way. And Teal'c looks at the markings Daniel made. O'Neill approaches and shines the light on the markings, and they read this way with an arrow underneath them. And Jack is like, you're good, man. Good job. Like, so we see the Unis and Daniel enter a larger chamber of the cave with fires and more Unis. And Jack and the team are close. They can hear the Unises roaring and shouting. SG-1 meet up with Daniel, and Daniel tells them not to shoot. So there's some dialogue, Daniel, Carter, O'Neill. So we all assume our roles.
Assume our normal roles.
All right. This started out as some sort of rite of passage. I think the alpha male was expecting the younger one to offer me up for some kind of feast. Instead, I think the younger one's trying to bring me into his clan.
Why?
We've communicated. We're friends.
Friends?
Don't. I think the younger one, because I think they were gonna like shoot or do something.
Yeah.
So Daniel says, "Don't." I think the younger one's trying to tell the clan that he's found something good for them.
And they're buying
good
that?
for them, Daniel? Like, is okay. Anyway, sorry. No, I don't think so.
No, they're not. They're not buying it.
Yeah, no.
No.
So using what he's learned, Daniel basically like asks the alpha to not kill him, which it kind of like takes this leader by surprise because he's like, what the fuck?
Like, our word for
yeah. But then he doesn't listen to him and he makes a move towards Daniel. Sam and Jack open fire, but it doesn't kill him. Then Daniel's Unis attacks the alpha, drowns him, and now he becomes the new leader of the clan. The other Unis accept him and he like roars and stuff and they like all scatter, like kind of indicating they're submitting to his succession. He gestures for Daniel to join, but Daniel declines. And Jack is like, what the hell did all of that mean? And Daniel's basically like, I have no idea, but I think I've just been invited to come back one day and find out. End of episode. So there was.
So
it was an episode. So, okay, my question is, how long was Rothman a Gould? That was my question. Was he a Gould the entire time? Like when he was still talking to Daniel? We don't know.
I theorize it's probably to like patch in the fact that like it could have happened weeks ago. I think it's meant to be that ambiguous because there's no way they hadn't gone over by the water. I have this in my head that I feel like Rothman went and found the water at some point and got infected. And then he intentionally probably kept teams away from that area so that it wouldn't be found out. Like, I think that's like a secret.
Oh, so that
or conspiracy theory in my head.
Or it could have happened when they were sleeping.
Yeah.
Yeah. It could have been either. And
because he seems pretty like normal. You know
yes.
like what's his name, Hawkins or whatever, is acting weird, right? But he's like throwing out earth slang and everything up until later. So I don't know.
No, I mean, he was doing it right up until the end, honestly. He was speaking like himself and like his tone and whatnot, and Hawkins was just like quiet and sitting there. And that also leads me to question, because you kind of brought it up, Wells, like, do these symbiote just not have full control? Or are they in control the whole time and just like really like clandestine undercover about it and trying to play the part?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh.
I wish we would have found out more.
Yeah.
So
agreed.
That was kind of my question, was like, when did Rothman become a Gould? So before we get to themes and discussions, you guys want to do a comments check? See what we got?
Hard 5 as I was. Mara's the heavy hitter this week.
Ooh.
Mara early on was like, imagine if Chaco was just messing with Daniel the whole time, and at the end he was like, sure, we can be friends. You've amused me greatly. There we go. There it is. Because I'm just kidding with you. I knew what you were saying all along.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And this back and forth between Mara and casually Sandra. Mara said, Daniel seems to have a lot of Daphne Blake kidnap moments. And casually Sandra said, true, he's the damsel in distress.
Hey, I'll take it. Over
uh,
Sam.
Sophie brought up a good point of always wondered why they stayed next to the water. Like after Teal'c shoots the symbiote,
The
right?
flying
Like, they're
symbiote,
still
yeah.
just like, sit down right here. We're gonna zip tie you right here next to this water, like right here. You know.
Good point.
I do think that's a good point. And then talking about the UAV without the nuclear power, Mara. This is Mara because Mara was so amused. Should have called Grandma to power the rescue mission.
Yeah.
Good callback, Mara, from last episode. Yeah.
Grandma Water.
Not Grandma.
Grandma got her arm back. She's good now. She's good. She's put back together.
She's back together. She can power the rescue mission.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about chocolate go old going on in the comments too. Like, so that was a solid,
I'll have to
solid comment section.
peruse.
Thank you for that, everybody.
I have a couple little things for themes and discussion, and then I'll hand this show over to Cristina because this is all you, girl. So when Daniel pulls the bullet out of Chaka's hand, he mentions Androcles and the lion, and this is a story of a runaway Roman slave who takes shelter in a cave, which turns out to be the den of a wounded lion. Androcles removes the thorn from the lion's paw. The lion then becomes tame towards Androcles and shares food with him. Years later, Androcles returns to Rome and as a fugitive slave is condemned to death to be killed by wild beast in the Circus Maximus. The beast turns out to be the same lion, which does not attack, and Androcles is spared. So that was kind of that reference. So I liked that backstory.
Mm-hmm.
And then also the reference when Daniel shares the chocolate bar, he makes the joke about this is how him and his father-in-law met, which is a callback to the movie when he first meets Kasuf. So that was kind of all I had. And really, like, I got nothing. I don't like looking at these themes that you came up with, Cristina. Like, I'm not saying that I hate these themes. I just hate the vehicle in which they were presented to us. Like,
agreed. And
if I can make one quick argument for the fact that they did have to return to that trope so much throughout the episode. And so my argument for it and why I actually appreciated it and appreciated that plot more than the B plot was that oftentimes when stuff like this happens in Stargate and a lot of other shows, you get to the end and you're like, I don't buy it because there's not been enough time to like for this bonding to have happened. And so I do think that the touch points were required, even though like it's a lot of obviously since they can't communicate with each other, it's a lot of back and forth of like not knowing what they're saying to each other. But I think at the end or like by the time they get to the fire scene where they're chuckling with each other, if that had happened and we hadn't seen as much of it as we had seen, I would have been like, where the fuck did this come from? You know? So I do think, you know, it was required to make it feel like it like had the proper pacing. And we know how oftentimes an episode feels like the pacing is doing it an injustice on these things. So that's my one argument for having to do it. But I also just liked sitting in those moments. I didn't mind that. I actually enjoyed it. I kind of liked us spending time with it a little more and spending time with just like one person having to basically get through their own thought process and figure things out. And I think it's what I mean, we all like Grace is such a popular episode, like later on with Carter kind of having to do similar things. Like she's having to talk to herself a lot and everything and figure things out. So
that was, I feel like, a much better execution of that.
Yeah. Well, and also there wasn't nearly as much of this having to shove in another B plot. Like the B plot is there in that one, but it's really just it's not as all over the place and you got to try to introduce this other concept of a go old that you don't even have time to like explain and things like that. So agreed, but that's my argument for why we did have to keep coming back around to it as much. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah. So all of what both of you said, in a lot of ways, I agree with Sarah, completely that I wish there would have been a better vessel to have these kind of like teachings or takeaways, but at the same time, I thought it was interesting because they were pulling back to a character type that we had met before, and I think trying to like recycle that, and in doing so, we're like, well, if we're gonna do the Unas, we want to go to primitive, like they were the early hosts of Gould. How interesting would it be to have this like, yeah, this B plot that's got this Gould thing going on, that it was messy, but I kind of understand the lay of the land, like why they might have gone there, but the intention was to make a Daniel episode where he could like really shine. Then I took this actually to ChatGPT in a way because I needed to talk out my thoughts a little bit. So just being full disclaimer here, I was just curious what would come back, because sometimes I struggle to chisel in my thoughts to very clear points. And I really appreciate what came out of it, because what I started with was how much I appreciate the trope in this episode and what they were trying to do, because Daniel, on multiple fronts, it wasn't just one strength of his that came through, which would have been like education on like culture or being able to understand it, but he also demonstrated like an ability to communicate, an ability to like use kind of observation versus like ego. And so anyway, so all of that got to what I'm about to just kind of talk us through, and like totally absolutely open to discussions and what have you on it. But
I
there's
think also, just really quick before you dive in.
Yeah.
I find it really amusing that they're like, Daniel's got to lose his glasses because we need close-ups of those baby blues the entire
I thought of that too.
Yeah.
I was like, when did he lose his glasses?
When he got dragged initially.
Oh, okay.
Like they fall off of him when he gets knocked down at the very beginning. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, baby blues.
Oh yeah.
As he's thinking,
important.
like as he's going through that thought process, it's like always the like this framing.
Face shot.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the takeaway. I'm just going to kind of read them, and then we can comment, discuss, whatever. So it says there's several key themes and commentaries that kind of come through. The first one being understanding and empathy. The episode highlights the importance of understanding and empathy in interactions with other cultures. Daniel Jackson's ability to communicate and empathize with the Unas demonstrates that understanding and compassion can bridge the gap between vastly different species. So that's kind of that step one into this trope of like what we see time and time again. So nothing really spectacular that we've talked that one through. The second one was the fear of the unknown kind of trope, and the episode explores the human tendency to fear what is not understood, because the initial reaction to the Unas is one of fear and hostility. But as the episode progresses, it does become clear that these reactions are based on misunderstandings and ignorance. Because as we learn more about the Unas and kind of what their primitive kind of culture or rites of passage are, there's more understanding into why they might fear or kind of hold this aggression. And they do have the ability to not just be violent, but they are curious and trying to learn and grow, which has kind of some notes there, but comments later. Third one is survival and adaptation as a theme. So both Daniel and the Unas Chaka must navigate their way through a dangerous environment, relying on survival and adaptability. This theme underscores the resilience of both humans and other species when faced with adversity. So in this case, where Unas, like where Chaka decides that he is going to protect Daniel. Don't know why he's going to protect Daniel when the Gould comes through, but that's like a shared enemy. Like that's something he fears, is if he decides to share in like a protection of like, I fear that, and if it's coming after you, maybe I don't fear you. I'm not sure what that is, but let me keep you safe. And that kind of created a stepping stone for this ability to adapt and kind of have different perspective. And then once Daniel showed learning of the language and some eagerness to build that, it really shocked, because again, that expressive kind of acting through the eyes, it really shocked him. Go, well, wait a second, this is not what I thought was going to happen. And it showed again Unas's ability to have like kind of a complex redirect of like, oh, well, let me sit with this. So I thought that was interesting. Fourth one is similar, culture exchange and learning. So the interactions between Daniel and Chaka represent a form of cultural exchange where both parties are learning from each other. And this is just, again, kind of a repetition of the other things. Thanks, ChatGPT. That was not a super original one. I like this one, though, the role of communication. And I know we as fries and as like friends in chat have had this come up quite a bit in our personal lives, but also in the show quite a bit, is that effective communication is a central theme, as Daniel's ability to speak the Unas language allows him to form a bond with Shaka. It highlights the power of language and communication and overcoming barriers and building relationships. Communication is everything. Like if there's unclear crossed wires, disastrous things can happen. So this desire for both of them to really continue to chip away at the communication and not go on assumptions, I thought was really interesting, as they did continue to dig away at that from both sides. Even if Daniel started it, the Unas did receive it and try to kind of reciprocate it back.
Mhm.
And then the final one was this kind of debate on scientific curiosity and ethical considerations. And I kind of like how we ended this episode after I read this point. So, episode does raise some questions around the ethical implications of scientific exploration, because the desire to study and understand the Unas must be balanced with also respecting their autonomy and avoiding exploitation. I appreciate that in this space, we didn't go, oh, we need to discover this. We need to research into why these Gould are different or all these things. We didn't hear a lot of that. It was very much a peaceful, like, let's let them be. And Daniel's thing of maybe there's an invitation to come back. But at this point, we're going to walk away from this and not continue to kind of disrupt that. So I thought those were really interesting points that kind of peeled out and better said what my head was trying to get me to. So I wanted to bring those through because, again, it is in a lot of ways like in the words of Sarah, like a nothing burger kind of episode. Like there's not a ton going on here, but it does show Daniel's skill set, and it's pretty broad when you kind of break it into those spaces. And it's not a physical thing. It's very mental and very relationship based. So I thought that was cool for him.
All right. So I do have some counterpoints to these points.
Go for it.
Kind of thought up. So number 2, where you said fear of the unknown. So I'm re-listening to this book I've mentioned before. It's called The Gift of Fear. I was talking to John about it because I was like, listen, this is kind of like my inner hater. Like, essentially the book talks about listening to your fear. Your fear is your most primal instinct, and not necessarily like, obviously don't let it control your life and crippling fear and like not like that, but listen to your instincts. Like they never lie. And you have them for a reason. If you get a weird vibe from someone, listen to that. Like don't go against your intuition because society has conditioned you to be like, well, you're overreacting, you're over emotional, don't be mean, don't be a bitch, like be nice to people. Like when all of your instincts are telling you this is a bad situation or this is a bad person, I need to exit this. Like society conditions us, especially as women and femme presenting people, don't be mean, don't hurt anyone's feelings, be nice. So I understand of like not letting it control your life, but I think Daniel through this episode, he kind of he probably is scared at some points, but as he's watching and listening to his instincts, he realizes, wait a minute, there's something else here. Realizing that the Unis was afraid of the UAV, watching what was going on. So like using your instincts to maybe and listen to them, not necessarily fearful instincts, but listening to that little voice in the back of your head and not ignoring that. Which I highly recommend that book. It's so good. The audiobook, I know people have hard times with audiobooks, but it's read by the author and it just feels like he's having a conversation with you because it's his own words. So I highly recommend it. It's so fascinating. He owns a security company, so he like provides security for like famous people like fucking Oprah. And he helps in situations of like stalkers, people who are harassing you, like that type of thing. He talks about how the fact that restraining orders are incredibly not effective, and it actually, in more cases than not, escalates the person to act out towards you even more. So very helpful and fascinating book. I highly recommend.
Well, and I think I like this discourse and kind of response back to it, because I do agree with you in the sense of your fear has a place. Like you absolutely should listen to it and anchor it because it's there for a reason. It is like a protective kind of a space for you. But to your point, like what is it? It's what you do with it. Like you should take pause, and like you should, to like what happened in the episode, like there was not an immediate response to the Unas. There was like, I'm going to just sit with this and I'm going to engage, truly where it's sitting.
Like, don't let your
yeah.
fear turn to hatred and prejudice and discrimination.
Totally.
Don't go
Use
to the
that
dark
instinct.
side.
Correct.
Yeah, don't go to the dark side.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I was. It's just that it made me think of that because it's so surface level for me since I'm re-listening to that. I'm trying to think. This wasn't necessarily part of the themes, but another thing, like to voice my dislike for that trope, that communication trope of like we're spending all this time. I think it's just like maybe the growing pains trope, because I also feel this way in later seasons when the Jaffa are trying to establish their own government, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so boring, because they have to go through these growing pains of like, who's going to be the leader in this council? Do we do this and do that? I don't know. Like, I think it can be done in an interesting way, but in these situations, I was like, this isn't doing it for me, man.
You
like
don't
these
need
growing pains.
You don't need C-SPAN on Dakara. That's
No.
not your bag.
I'm good. I'm
Absolutely
good,
not.
man. Yeah.
I want to
the day that somebody referred to Star Wars Episode 2 as C-SPAN in space was the day that I lost my shit. That's
amazing.
It's perfect.
I've never heard that. I've never heard that. That is amazing.
Space. Yep.
That is so fucking spot on. Okay, real quick. So I responded in the chat, but so Frank made a comment around the last point. And I'm trying to make my commentary specific to this episode. But we do later on see the conversation come up again around scientific curiosity and ethics. In this episode, we walk away. In this episode.
But do you know why? Do you know why they didn't? This is the hater in me coming out. They didn't walk away out of a sign of respect. They walked away because the Unas had nothing to offer them. They weren't this advanced technological race that they wanted to share our stuff, like.
But this is, so, but it comes up later, and because it's in the comments. So, because later it gets to this point of, we walk away at that point from a militaristic standpoint because there's not something to offer. We do, however, observe them from a more pedestaled lens later on, and that's a topic I want to leave that to when we do that later. But like, what do we do when we see more primitive and can't let them be? But in this specific episode, we do somewhat let them be for a moment. But
but not out of the kindness of their hearts.
No.
Also, there were a lot of people that had died.
And they just throw that out there too.
They're like, I don't know. There's probably some forms that have to be filled out.
We gotta cut our losses,
before you can do more.
But like, it's also okay. I just want to do a couple callbacks to some other episodes where one or two people have died, and we've literally bombed their entire existence to smithereens. And then in others, like this one, we just kind of go, oh, collateral damage, and move on.
Wait,
so what are the other inconsistent?
What are the other instances?
So when what was the episode where we collapsed their base? It wasn't they didn't kill our people. It was they were having genocide on the other part.
Oh, the other side. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Like we have,
I mean, the Unas
big bravados, and we don't. So we've already talked about that, but I'm more saying just the hypocrisy in the actions as a collective is interesting, or not hypocrisy, but the inconsistency. It's a discussion to be had. I don't disagree at all in how this one ended. We should have paid more respects and given proper burials to those who died, like
on Earth,
on Earth.
Really throwaway line too.
Yeah,
Like, it's almost like the only reason they even put that part in there was to get the rest of SG-2 out of the last scene. Because they had to have a reason for them to stay behind. So that in the cave, it was only going to be SG-1 and the Unas.
Griff was shot too. Fucking Griff.
Yeah.
1950s greaser Griff.
Right.
Like, they could have used that.
The other, no, they could have, yeah. They're like, but they were like, we'll take care of this, sir, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's.
I need more context. Could you imagine Rothman's parents? Hello, we'd like to visit our son's grave. Can we catch the next wormhole to wherever the fuck?
Right?
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I hope that meant that like they were taking the bodies back, but
I'm sure
it was
did.
just a very strange. It was a throwaway line.
It's like, what? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, his the other SG2 member could have just like been like, I'll stay with him. I'll stay with Griff. You guys go get Dr. Jackson, you know?
Yeah.
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 It's
So
weird.
that was this episode.
I'm like, okay
I
with
guess.
this episode. I really am.
Yeah, I don't have disdain for it.
I
I enjoy
appreciate
conversation from it.
I appreciate why you don't, Sarah, and why you found it like dragging, you know, personally.
It's not one I would like choose to rewatch.
There's part of me that's also like, there may be a little, and I'm just curious. I'm just thinking about it. There may be a little bit because I like the like trying to figure out how to communicate with each other trope, and there might be a huge part of that being because I lived in Korea and had those literal conversations that way with Korean people a lot. Like we're sitting at a bar trying to like talk to each other, me in broken Korean and them in broken English, and trying to like figure it out. So there could actually be a little bit of nostalgia for me going on with things like that. I could totally see that too, being like having been in that situation, not to that extreme. Like obviously it's an extreme in the episode.
Correct.
But like trying to figure out ways that don't involve, oh God, people don't yell louder. That doesn't work. Like so many people I saw just like speaking in English more loudly to people.
It doesn't help.
That doesn't help. Please don't do that. Slowing down does though. Slowing your language down definitely helps. But yeah, so that's probably part of it for me too, and maybe why I like that trope a little more, and I like to sit in it a little more. Yeah, just thinking of that now, like, oh wait, there might be a reason for that.
Makes a lot of sense. Which also plays into like when I was talking before we hopped on about, it reminds me of like talking to a child. So again, personal experience. It's that like, how am I going to teach you what this is other than just repetitive language? So that
other than, I mean, we all knew what beer meant really quickly when you're hanging out in a bar together. Like we're good with that one. But yeah.
The thing that gets me, if we're talking about like languages like Korean and Chinese and Japanese, like it's a very tonal language, and that really messes, like the inflections are so much more, it's very nuanced, and like you change the inflection of how you say it and it completely changes the word.
So
I mean,
my kids in Korea argued that same point back at us towards English too, though.
I was gonna say English, I think is worse.
How? Like what?
Read,
what
read,
examples?
Read, read.
No, not even that. Like the fact that you can say a sentence and turn it into a question by just raising your voice.
Okay.
At the end.
Yeah. That's a good example. Yeah. That's true.
And it's just what's funny to me is like, kids are sponges anyway. So when you be like, hey, I'm gonna blow your mind even more. The thing that we do to do that, you're doing it with this example, and they're like, oh, like they freak out about it. And it's great. Or like, yeah. So it goes both ways for sure. And it's because they're not related. You know, they're not related in family. The languages aren't. It just makes it trickier. Korean's a little easier because at least the alphabet is phonetic. As opposed to Chinese and Japanese, where it's not as straightforward as like Korean. But yeah, it's still, in fancy cases they still use Chinese characters too, but like the language of the people, which was literally created so that more people could be literate in Korea back in the day, by the way.
Interesting.
Like the emperor was like, I'm gonna make sure everybody can read, so let's create this alphabet that actually makes sense, and like anybody can learn it, you know. But yeah, it's
cool.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. for sure. And I think I feel like your experiences with that would be far more interesting than this episode because
Totally.
we know the language, we have the baseline. Like
Yeah.
it's not like you're starting from zero, which is
Yeah.
what was happening here. And I was just like, I'm so bored. I hate this.
Right.
Like,
No, I feel you. I understand.
exhausting.
Like, I
Yeah.
totally understand. Like, even if I'm like, oh, I kind of dug being, doing that. I get
Yeah.
it. If it's not your
But
bag.
no, from your perspective, I get why you enjoy it more. Like after hearing those,
Mhm.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Everybody everybody out there, try to have a conversation with somebody in a language you don't know. It's fun. And it actually, if you're in the right setting, everybody's relaxed. You're sitting at like in a restaurant or a pub or whatever, and you have things in front of you, so you kind of have a basis to jump off of.
Mhm.
It's really engaged. Like your brain is fully engaged. It's really
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Cool. I think that's it. Is that all we got?
That's all I
That's all
got.
I got.
All right.
I
Christina,
think
ready?
we said whose turn it is. Hold on, let me queued up. I'm queued up. Thank you,
Are
everybody.
you queued up? Are you queued up? All right. Thank you, everyone. All right. You guys ready for this? All right. Ancient languages are tough, but negotiating with Unos is tougher. Just remember, everyone, avoid sharp teeth and protect your neck. Close the iris.